right. Well, we are 6 after, so I guess we can go ahead and get started. Greg, take it away.
Awesome. Thank you. Thanks for giving us this time to chat about this. This is something that I talk to a lot of individuals about, right? Sort of the co-owner of Level Effect and creating our Cyber Defense Analyst Bootcamp, and sort of fighting every day to sort of change the perception of boot camps because they definitely get a bad rap. So I'm sure people might have questions, and we can talk about a little bit that later on sort of how to find a good boot camp or find good training. Because you don't need a boot camp to get into cyber. There's many different paths, and it really depends on personalities and your personal drive. But a little bit about myself before we get into it. I'm a United States Air Force veteran. I spent 9 years in the military. I started out as a signals analyst, doing, being the Air Force, working around different airframes, the U-2, Global Hawk, Predator, primarily those platforms. And then I got sent over to work at Fort Meade, and sort of transitioned into network exploitation, network analysis, digital network intelligence kind of roles. And I'd always had a passion for cyber concepts, computers, building computers from a young age. So really had a lot of excitement around like being technical and working on technical things and mainly breaking things. And I was very fortunate enough to meet some wonderful individuals who mentored me, answered all my really dumb questions at the time, and I still have dumb questions 19 years later. But I formed Level Effect, left the government, and we made some endpoint detection and response technology, and that was acquired by a company called Huntress, and that's where I work at my day job. So in the evenings, I do teaching and education and helping people sort of find their place in cybersecurity. So one of the questions I think a lot of people ask when they initially reach out to us or they just talk to us on LinkedIn and stuff is, with so many paths to get into cyber, where do I start? I'm in college, but I'm getting burnt out in college. Do I go to a boot camp? Do I finish my degree, go to a boot camp? Do I even go to a boot camp? Can I just do it all on YouTube? And I think if you're new to cyber, or if you've been here for a while, you'll probably hear the answer. It depends a lot because there's a lot of contextual things that we have to take into account for every situation. But I like to sort of take a step back and talk about it holistically. That like I am all for college education. I think it provides a lot of value in like time management, understanding things at like a deeper perspective. I had one class in college just on VPNs, and I learned more than I'd ever want to know about a VPN and like why they work and the way they do. And while that is really great to have that kind of strategic depth knowledge, like it was created in this year by these people, that's all well and good. But there is a problem with that learning style, and that it is not technical. It's not hands-on, and we're dealing with an industry that needs technical skills. They're dealing with threats, and unfortunately, they need people who can bring solutions to the table very quickly and not talk about the problems. Right? We need more action than words a lot of times, and I think that is a general trend that's impacting more and more people. And it's not getting any easier, right? I mean, we've all seen it. There's always the ridiculous things. You go online and you see entry-level jobs with 5 years of experience. It's unrealistic. But
yeah, those entry-level jobs asking for your CISSP.
Yeah, and I mean, there's some things to that, like the ATS systems, how they integrate with LinkedIn. LinkedIn automatically makes every job entry level. So there are issues where there's just technical bugs with how things work, and hiring managers don't notice that their jobs are being listed as entry level. That's happened to me. I posted a job for a threat hunter, and I got over like 300 applications. Was overwhelmed in a very short amount of time, and it was very apparent that many of the people applying, they've never done threat hunting. It was their first foray into it. They wanted to, get their foot in the door, and there's nothing wrong with that. But the problem is my write-up was definitely for a mid to senior tier. Like I needed somebody who can help build a threat hunting program, manage it, and run it with me, like sort of co-chairing it, right? So that's when we learned, why are all these positions being listed as entry level? And it sort of dawned on us that this is a bigger problem. And I've talked about it on LinkedIn, and there's other people who've mentioned it since I've learned about that. And it is a big problem. But before I ramble too much further on, before we get into another question, and I will say, please ask your questions in chat. I really want to make the time to answer your questions. Your questions are more important than the questions I came up with. I'm happy just to work off of your guys' questions if need be, but I do have some of my own just to keep it the dead air to a minimum. But you know, the whole college boot camp or self-study thing, absolutely, we could self-study. You could spend the time and you could do it. I think the value of a boot camp, and I'm biased, I own a boot camp, right? So with that going into it, the value I think we provide is, I've got 19 years of experience. My co-founders all have like 10 plus years. We all have NSA experience. We've seen really weird things. We've seen data at scale, you know, scaling detection, doing things that are beyond, you know, like small or even large enterprises. And I think the value in any boot camp, or it should be the value, is being able to fast track you through those lessons learned. Like, you shouldn't have to go through the 19 years of pain I have to get to the same realizations. So that's the main goal. And it's mainly for like working individuals. You're working that full-time job. You need something that's very laser focused. And that's another thing you need to look for in a boot camp or any training. What are you wanting to learn? And are they going to get you there in a reasonable amount of time? That's really, really important. What are parameters one can use to validate a boot camp before signing up? This is a really big question, and it's something that frustrates me. Very, very good question. Unfortunately, a lot of people, the trend that I see, a lot of people show up to us and they see, like, you know, we have like a teaser video, like John Hammond did a video on our course, and I think that gets a lot of people excited. And people sort of reach out to us like ready to sign up. And I always, my sales tactic is to try to get them not to do my boot camp, because I want them to really understand that it's going to be painful and it's expensive and it's time consuming, and there's still no guarantees at the end. I can't guarantee you a job in 4 to 5 months. The market is wild, and we could talk more about the reasons for that. But I think one of the things, a few of the things you could focus on, and I'm actually writing a blog post on how to shop for a boot camp, so this is a good question, but who wrote their curriculum? A lot of boot camps contract out content developers to make their content, and then the material gets stagnant. Some boot camps have their curriculum sit idle for years. In 2 years that we've had our boot camp, we've done 5 major revisions. We've added big breaches and attacks to our curriculum within 30 days of it becoming like a big thing in the news. So we try to chase trends. We try to stay relevant and fresh. So who's making the curriculum? And then who are your instructors? I think if you're going to spend this kind of money, because boot camps aren't cheap due to just the amount of time we spend with students, it's inevitable. Who is going to be providing you that mentorship? Who's going to be with you in the trenches day in, day out? What are you going to be learning? And then last but not least, but still pretty generic, when you're looking at the curriculum, be cognizant of the areas that you're touching on. Like, some boot camps will cover like cyber defense, penetration testing, cryptography, and like everything in between. And the problem there is that's such a wide range of skills that most people in this industry don't use those skills all at the same time or even in a monthly window. I've been doing this 19 years and I've never really had to use any of my crypto knowledge. I've just not been in that role. That doesn't mean you might not be in that situation. But the point about it is, what does the industry need? We need cyber defenders. We need people who could show up, identify malware, triage computers to see if they're compromised, review spam emails to determine if it is malicious, how to extract indicators from all that content, how to write basic signatures and detection rules to detect that stuff so it doesn't happen again. Like, those are the kinds of things businesses need. They need somebody who could come in and help with those things. So you want to make sure that the curriculum is focused, and that if you're exposed to something, you reuse it every module. Like in our course, the stuff you learn on day 1, you literally are including it in your report in the last week, 14 weeks later of the course. We do not expose you to something and then expect you never to use it. the underlying expectation is you will always add that skill to your reporting and your analysis. If you do a Windows host triage and you give me the report and you say, oh, there's malware and it's making network connections, and you don't have a PCAP that you collected from it that you've analyzed, I'm going to hand you back the report and say, you know how to do network collection and data analysis of network packets. Come back to me when you've added that. So you want to look for a program that's going to teach you something and reinforce that, because you need to build your working knowledge of those skills, because in your interview, you have to be confident in those skills, right? You can't show up and be like, well, I know a little bit about crypto, I know a little bit about pen testing, I know a little about this, but I need you to train me. That's a really precarious situation to be in if you're looking for a training provider. You need to be prepared to do the job. That was a long answer on my part. Tom, did you want to throw anything in there?
I just want to say, for my time here at VetSec, so I'm a graduate of a boot camp myself. Way back in the day, the Navy sent me to a boot camp on Security Plus, 4 days long. Take the exam on Friday, right? Obviously, there were some benefits of that. I learned it quickly, got the material, but I didn't have the time to build that knowledge of hands-on keyboard kind of practical experience. Yeah, I have the certification, and since then I've grown in my knowledge. But one thing I've seen just in my role here at VetSec, when you look at those boot camps, is if they display those metrics on guaranteed employment or employment rates post-graduation or graduation rates, you got to ask the questions on how they're making those. I have some pretty strong feelings about boot camps in general. I have likened some cybersecurity boot camps to the sleazy car salesman right outside the post that's trying to get you for 35% interest, because I've seen those boot camps where it's 8 weeks long, it's $20,000, and it prepares you to take the Security Plus exam. And it just blows my mind that those are out there, right?
Yeah, you could get a $35 study book and a $300 voucher, and you could get a Security Plus in a month on your own time. Yeah.
Right, exactly. Yeah, absolutely. David's asking, what do you think, is there age discrimination in cyber?
Is there age discrimination in cyber? I think so. I've been fortunate enough to work at a bunch of really wonderful businesses that are transparent and care about people and are a people first kind of like hiring practice, right? They want to find like a good individual who's like a good fit, and then they're fine knowing that there's some technical deficits that we can fill and equip and train people. So they do things the right way, and I'm very selective where I work because of those things. Unfortunately, I do think it does happen, and to me it's anecdotal. I don't have any facts or figures. I could just say I've had students who are in their late 40s, 50s, and in that range, and they've gotten into technical roles. But I think the challenge is, because of their life experience, they're being forced and pivoted into sales and sales support and those kinds of roles. And a part of it is like, you're being selected. There's an assumption due to your age that you're going to be better at selling and communicating and disarming somebody than some, young punk out of college being like, buy my wares, So I could see that. So it's a type of discrimination, absolutely. But I think it also speaks to a bigger problem about the lack of interpersonal skills in cyber, right? There's always, I worked at the NSA for a long time, and I was in the military, as I said, and we always had a joke, like, how do you know, if we're all wearing civvies, how do you know who's the military and who's a civilian? And they said, all the military people will stare at other people's shoes, right? So it was always this, like, you have this lack of interpersonal skills and just being able to communicate with people. And that's something in my 19 years that I've learned that has been the most valuable skill set out of all of the malware analysis and the log analysis and knowing about threats. Talking to other people, and especially talking to non-technical business leaders and other individuals in a business is the biggest skill. So I think there is an ageism thing happening, but I think it's due to a severe lack in people's ability to communicate and be strategic thinkers. And I think there's an assumption that people with more cycles around the sun have that wisdom and maturity to sort of get things to that point. I hope that answered the question well enough.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail right on the head there. I definitely think there's age discrimination, period, whether you're in cybersecurity or not. And I think the way you spelled that out there with kind of pigeonholing people into roles based on their presumed maturity or lack thereof definitely is a form of age discrimination.
Yeah.
Anwar asked about parameters we can use to kind of validate a boot camp before signing up. I think we kind of touched on that a bit already.
Yeah, I wanted to touch on one thing you said about that. That is really interesting. So we have a boot camp, and we don't keep or share stats like that. We don't say N percentage of our students get jobs in N months because it is so wildly manipulated. I have worked at other boot camps. I know people who work at other boot camps. So, and I know how the industry works. It's like anything. It's a pay to play. Like if I want lots of reviews on the review websites, I pay for blogs and I pay for marketing outreach through those providers. So yeah. It's a very shady practice because it looks independent and it looks like it's not biased, but it totally is behind the scenes. So we don't participate in those things. All of our reviews are, we told our students, if you want to review us, if you want to flame us, by all means, here's how you do it. And so far it's worked out, but we don't have as many reviews as other vendors out there because they do things. They pay for reviews. They give Amazon gift cards, things of that nature. But specifically to the stats you brought up, Tom, I've seen boot camps, and because I've done the competitive analysis because they're my competitors, if you look at the fine print on a lot of these like guaranteed job offer things, like don't pay anything up front, go through the boot camp, and when you get a job, which we guarantee you'll get a job, you don't have to pay it back, or pay it back through depending on how much money you've made. The problem is if you read into the fine details, you have to have a bachelor's degree. I saw one where you had to give a talk at a reputable conference within a year of graduation, and you had to make a job that made a certain amount. Like there was so many requirements that it was like it's things I haven't been able to knock out in 19 years, and let alone somebody who's completely new to this industry accomplishing all this in a year. It's very apparent that if somebody could do that, they never needed the boot camp, right? Sure. Like, so. That's a big problem with boot camps is they offer a lot, but you have to jump through a lot of hoops. So we just don't play in any of that. We just say we're a training provider. We try our damnedest to help you out, and if that isn't enough, then I respect your decision to go somewhere else, and I wish people all the luck in the world. And I still mentor people. I have people who didn't go with us; they went through somebody else, and I still mentor them on LinkedIn. Like it's just gotta help people. Like they don't know any better.
Yeah, one thing that frankly kind of shocked me, just because I guess I just assume the honesty and best in people, especially when I'm looking at different providers and partnerships for VetSec. One of the things that surprised me was, with some of the funding that those training providers can get from the VA, like VetTech. I think one of the agreements with VetTech is, you get the money from the VA, but the training provider has to pay it back if the member doesn't find employment within a certain amount of time. And I think that's a great incentive for the VA to make sure that the quality of training being provided is great. But then from talking to some of these that reached out to me that wanted, our name and logo on them, was they were hiring graduates internally to help write more curriculum for them or write marketing material or God knows what. And they were hiring them for the bare minimum time so that they didn't have to pay the money back, and then they were letting them go. And just in digging deeper, I was finding this out, and it made me mad, like this is completely skewed statistics on how you're doing it.
Yeah, there's also boot camps that basically contract out their grads to other businesses, so they build business relationships. You go through their boot camp, you pay them for their boot camp, and then they send you to go work under, like they basically hire you as a contract for hire to go work for somebody else. And I don't have like a huge problem with that. I think the area of concern I have is they're no longer looking for the student's best interest, because right. It's all about how much can I sell this body for to the highest bidder, and what was the lowest amount this person will potentially take to do the work. And it's like, you promised them a job as a training provider, and you're now abusing that relationship. So like those are the things that really sicken me. And when you read about reviews about boot camps, and this is even for my own, I don't take reviews to mean anything, because who is going to really trash the boot camp they just spent a lot of money on? They're trying to get a job. You don't want to like have on your resume, oh, I went to a Level Effect, my boot camp, and then you like trash it like how terrible it was. It isn't, but if that was your experience, fair. And you trash it, like you're not incentivized to do that, because you're now harming your job chances, and you don't have more money to go spend at one of these boot camps. So whenever you read reviews about training, it's skewed, right? It's biased for the training providers. We have the advantage, and that's not right. So just food for thought there as well.
Yeah, absolutely. David's asking, currently working full-time as an analyst in another field. He's got a real full-time life, house, family, bills, studying cyber after he's off in his evening time. How do we suggest he engages with the training as available to land that first job in cyber and continue paying his bills?
No, that's a really good question. There's a lot of people in that, and the solution isn't sign up at Level Effect and take my boot camp. The solution is find something you're passionate in. If you want to reach out to me or find other people to mentor you, feel free. I'm happy to have a one-on-one discussion about your unique needs. But you want to find your passion. I think passion is something that sticks out like in a good way, a sore thumb. It sticks out like a sore thumb in a good way. I couldn't think of a better analogy at the moment, but I would rather hire a good person with great intentions and a passion for this industry to do the right thing, who's missing some technical skills. I have the time at work to mentor and train people. Not every business does, but there's a lot of businesses that do. So networking, coming to events like this, VetSecCon, there's 100 people I see online right now. Like, you should be trying to network with every darn person. If you're a military member, getting in VetSec and networking with everybody there, they're constantly posting about jobs. I've got a Discord. I mean, everybody's got a Discord server that has job postings and stuff like that. I think if you're in school, finish up your school. Don't burn yourself out, right? Like, if you're okay doing your job and you're not killing yourself, just stick it out and be patient. Find what you're passionate about and learn little bits at a time. There's tons of free material. I work with a fine gentleman named John Hammond, and he's constantly putting out great content for free. And I think if you go back to some of his earlier videos, you could start to learn, some of the malware analysis, some of the pen testing things, some Linux skills. Just start to become technical, find your passion, focus on it, and be consistent in your delivery and tell that story. And you're going to tell the story to everybody you network with. And through that, you'll get a job. It's inevitable. It might take longer, but it's inevitable if that's your goal.
Yeah, I would just add that a lot of people say they're coming into this industry because they think it's an easy button. They think there are so many unfilled jobs in cyber. I can be a breathing person and I'm going to have a job. And it's not as easy as we say. My last shore duty, I did my bachelor's degree in my evening spare time weekends. This shore duty, I did my master's degree, and I do contract work on the side to try and get some experience in the industry so that when I transition out of the military, I'll have that lined up as well. But just keep at it. And networking is huge. Every role that I've talked about getting or that I have been offered has been through networks like VetSec and LinkedIn and people I've met going to conferences. So I think networking is such a huge piece of this. And I think that's another thing that some other training providers don't talk about a lot, is that the career services. Adam's asking, hey, you have a certification with Level Effect as well, right? Does that come with the boot camp, or is that something separate?
Oh, it comes with the boot camp. Yeah. So our certification means nothing. So it's and what provider says that it doesn't. We're not industry recognized. What we saw was a problem in the blue team, the security side of things. There's no hands-on certifications. I have 4 SANS certs, and you could pass SANS without ever opening up the lab book and typing one line of a command. If you're just a good test taker, if you could study, write a good index, which now I think they give people the indexes, so you're all cheaters, because we in the olden times had to do it the hard way.
Do they really give the index now?
Yeah, I think so. Somebody was telling me about that. I need to look into that, but I heard, yeah, the books have an index now, and I feel that's just
Oh,
that much easier.
That's
Yeah.
not right. That was the challenge, was how could you write your indexes?
Yeah, I whenever I did a SAN cert, I would watch all the videos because I did them all on demand. I would watch the videos, do the labs, and I would spend 40 hours. I would literally clock. It would take me on average 40 hours to build a complete index, and
Yeah.
I'd print it out, bring all my books to the test center, and I'd get a 90+% every time.
Sure.
Good training. I'm not knocking their training, but the problem I saw is that there is no proof of mastery and skill in that endeavor, and that's the problem. Oh man, this is a very loaded issue here, but cybersecurity is all about managing risk. If we take all the sexy coolness away, it's just managing risk. That's all it is. Adversaries are trying to abuse businesses. Businesses want to, operate in the 21st century. They need to use the internet. They need to have a website and make money online. All their workers are probably remote nowadays. Maybe not in all cases, but they have inherent risk with how they operate. So a hiring manager has a budget, and they have a level of risk that they're trying to mitigate with that budget. So they're looking to find a unicorn. That's why you get these job applications where it's like entry level, 3 years of experience. They're truly hoping for that they can find somebody who has experience, who desperately needs a job, that they could pay them less to get in the door. So they're reducing their risk at a lower price point. So it's a win-win for the business. And it causes a lot of confusion, right, that we see on our side of things when we're like, why does this, Tom said earlier, why does this entry-level position require a CISP, which is insane. So that's the problem we're dealing with, and that's what we tried to create. So when we created our boot camp, we actually made this certification first. We said people have to know how to do this, and in ours, you have to do phishing analysis, multiple phishing emails, and it's a chain of analysis. You could go from a phishing email in our capstone all the way to a malicious binary that you're doing static and dynamic analysis on. There's an insider threat. You have to do log analysis. There's a threat intelligence report you have to generate. And then there's a compromised host where we just give you a host. It's compromised. You have to find the malware on your own, extract it, and then analyze it. And it is encompassed in 5 individual reports, and students have 7 days. So our certification doesn't mean anything. It's not well known. Nobody knows it is, but it's for us a personal testament that you can do the job, because when you need to go to that hiring manager and they're going to interview you, you have to be able to definitely show them that you could reduce the risk. Yes, I'm new to this industry, but I could do intermediate SOC 2 level work today. You do not need to train me on Windows triage, malware analysis, threat intelligence. I understand threat actors. We do have an adversary tactics module where they use Covenant and do some lateral movement and domain exploitation and stuff like that, all for the sake of learning how adversaries do it so we could detect it and define it. So long story short, that's what our certification is. It's a testament that you can do the work.
All right, and Joel's asking, what roles should he be targeting that can help lead to pen testing in the future? Because he has no experience in pen testing right now, but he's studying for ethical hacking. There's a lot of good training providers out there that can get hands-on keyboard experience. There's both free resources out there and paid. A Try Hack Me subscription is pretty low cost entry. But there's also places like VulnHub where you can download virtual machines and go after them that way. And all of that is experience that you can list on your resume. That's kind of the first thing I'd say. Pen testing, like in my talk this morning, I shared a little meme about how everyone thinks cybersecurity is being a hacker, right? I will just say there's a lot of people that want to go be a hacker, and there's not enough roles to match, just to set some expectations on that. But Greg, what do you think?
No, absolutely. That's something I talk to a lot of my students about, because a lot of people who don't have exposure to our industry, that's the sexy perception. Like, I want to be, to be hands-on keyboard, breaking down stuff. And I've engaged in red teaming and pen testing exercises, and they can be fun the first few times you do it. And then it becomes like anything, it becomes it loses its luster. And it's really, pen testing is a checklist of security controls. Once you learn the tools and how to assess those things, you're like walking around somebody's house, jangling all the doorknobs and, pushing on the windows. That's what pen testing is. It's not inherently a super sexy thing, I think there's a few influencers who are writing custom exploits and doing that kind of stuff, and that is sexy. That's cool. But I think that's, like you said, Tom, that's the perception a lot of people think all pen testing is, and that's certainly not the case. I this morning I actually looked up because I knew this would come up. I just like in my bones because it happened so much. There's over 30,000 cybersecurity analyst jobs on Indeed right now, and there's 389 pen testing jobs. So 1% of the jobs available on Indeed are pen testing jobs. So they're out there, they're doable. But to me, pen testing also requires a competency, a technical competency across the board, right? Like, how do you penetrate and break the security or the control of something without having a deeper understanding of what the control is and what its intention was, right? And that's the defensive side of things. So no matter what you do, you want to focus on network analysis, whether you want to go into pen testing or you want to go to the defensive side. Networking is the common medium for everything that we do, right? Malware can hide on an endpoint, but it's got to talk to the command and control server over the network, right? So if we all start at the commonality of getting really good at network analysis, network triage, network forensics, you are very set up if you want to go to offensive or defensive track. The next phase is you want to learn some comp sci basics around the operating systems, Windows and Linux being the two primary that you'll probably come across, and Windows and Mac being very similar to the Unix architecture. What is a process? How does an application instantiate on a computer? How does that work? What are the common ways that they're manipulated? You want to start to get really comfortable with those concepts, and then from there, start learning how people defend networks and computers, right? If you understand how they defend them, you can work at breaking them.
Yeah, that's all great stuff. I think one thing that I didn't understand for sure, again, coming into this and being like, oh, hacking is hacking and that's all you do is break stuff. There's a lot of report writing that goes into pen testing as well.
Yes.
Like
I would think
pen test, 90% report writing, and like you said, at the end of the day, it is a controls checklist. Once you know the tool set, you're, like you said, you're finding all the ways that the house is vulnerable and how I can get in. Joel, I would suggest, like Greg said, a strong fundamental knowledge of networking and how those applications work, that OSI model, and look at some of those SOC analyst roles, those cyber defender roles, because I'll tell you, in my experience, there are a lot of companies looking to fill those roles, and it's a great place to start getting that experience and kind of just get hands on keyboard. And I think those are just as interesting now that I've seen some of those people doing those jobs as pen testing themselves.
Yeah. And it's the same. I think this is the same for the defensive and offensive sides. It's all dependent upon where you work, but I know some people who do pen testing and they're sort of burnt out, right? Because they work for consultancies. So like every week you're working 2 to 3 engagements on top of each other, and it's just report writing. You're doing the road, like, all right, fire up the scanner, run the scan, do Dirbuster, where's the web app, run the tools, get the artifacts, write the report. It's this very repetitious thing where a lot of the vulnerabilities and misconfigurations you see start to become like everybody has them, right? So it gets to this sort of place where you're just sort of doing a lot of the same things over again. I personally really enjoy the defensive side of things because I'm having to keep up with adversaries who are humans, right? Like a lot of people say, I want to do malware analysis, and they like the challenge of it. And that's great. But what I find fascinating about the defender side of things is whether it's malware or hands-on keyboard, that's a human. Like I'm directly battling the ingenuity of another person. This isn't me fighting malware. This is me fighting human creativity. If I block their malware today, they're not going to give up. They're smart. They're going to think of a new thing to do, and they're going to pivot. And I'm going to have to I'm going to have to account for that and try to beat them. So I very much like my role doing like detection engineering and threat hunting because to me it's very spy versus spy kind of stuff. So.
Well, let's talk just a little bit about kind of getting into the industry. So, interviews and resumes. I guess. Well, so I'll talk a little bit on the resume side. I'll ping on VetSec again, and we have a resume help channel and some great advice from some awesome people in there. I think you're going to get 100 different opinions on your resume if you show it to 100 people, but there's some commonalities there. So get it in the hands of people that are in the industry and let them kind of take a whack at it. Where can you really improve and set yourselves apart? I would say if you don't have experience, showing some of that passion in your resume, whether it's doing home lab stuff, write a blog, share your GitHub if you're doing coding, right? Anything like that you can throw out there. Joe in the chat just said, hey, resume helped him land his current position, which is awesome. And I love seeing that. There's a ton of people in there that if you don't read the pin post, they'll shame you a little until you do. But then once you get it up there, they'll help tear it apart. But what do you got, Greg? And on interviews too, how do you prep for those?
Yeah, I think all good points, and you're so spot on, right? You show it to 100 people, you're going to get 100 different responses, and I think a part of that has to go back to what you're confident about and what story you want to tell, because you're telling a story here. Now, your story needs to be aligned to what you're trying to do. For instance, I said I had an open position for a threat hunter earlier this year, and I had well over 200 candidates. Only 8 of them tailored their resume to a threat hunt role. Everybody else was like system admins, security analysts, SOC analysts. And if you don't know, I think threat hunting has this sort of sexiness appeal. It's sort of like the blue teamer's pen tester. It's like, oh, I'm hunting threats, and it sounds cool. But really, threat hunting is a process more than a technical skill set, right? Like if you're an incident responder who knows how to do adversary research, like what does threat actor do, and generate a hypothesis from that, and you can go collect the evidence to prove or disprove it, you're threat hunting. That's really all it is. So the resumes that spoke to what threat hunting is, and they aligned their goals and their skills and where they bring value to the company around those realities. The person we hired talked about how they managed expectations with leadership on what is good and not good threat hunt results, right? Like just if we do a threat hunt, we don't find a bad guy, there's still value in the effort. We learned a lot about how our network was configured. What data did we have? What data did we not have? We ran a simulation to mimic what we would look like, and we only saw 50% of that. That helps guide risk, knowledge gap. How is our tooling configured? What products and visibility might we be missing, and what could we do to fill those gaps? There's tons of value in the journey, and I think tailoring your resumes to telling that story on how you understand the role and the value you're going to bring is a huge weight off the hiring manager's mind, because as a hiring manager, I had to look at hundreds of resumes, and I had to strain to think about, like, how will this SOC analyst transition to a threat hunter? And they didn't give me any information. So it's weird dichotomy, because like I'm biased because they didn't give me answers. I'm inclined not to accept them. But then if I force, like maybe this, like I'm trying to force the narrative that maybe they would be a good fit, which is also a problem. I'm creating this confirmation bias in the process myself. So I can't say that enough. Tailoring your resume. And a lot of resumes I looked at were people who had more experience that would make me look like an idiot on a lot of topics. But they didn't take the time to tailor the resume, and I didn't know how that would translate to the role, so we didn't move forward with those candidates. So definitely tailor your resume. And like we said before, remember, hiring managers are trying to reduce risk. Just like you are trying to sell yourself as a product to reduce that risk. If you're not doing that, then you're not going to have a lot of luck. It's going to be a lot of hard lessons. And as far as preparing for an interview, start interviewing. Apply to every job, write custom resumes. It's a grind. It sucks. And I don't say this because I want to waste people's time, but find businesses you may or may not really want to work at, but you're interested in their role. Go apply for them. If you can interview with them and they say no to you, it's no skin off your back. You're not devastated by that, right? You don't want to go to your dream job first and be like, let me try out this technical interview. Cyber interviews are relatively the same questions generally. So go to a few interviews where you wouldn't be upset if you didn't get the job, and use those as your proving grounds. You have to have practical skills, and interviewing is one of them.
Oh, great points. We are at time, but I'm happy to take any more questions from the group.
Likewise.
And hang out for a couple minutes. But I do want to let everyone know the next set of sessions should be kicking off here as well. So understand if people want to jump to those. David posted some questions about resume help. Pin posts in the Slack, throw them up there. Reach out to somebody like Greg on LinkedIn, right, for some of that mentorship as well. Anybody can connect with me. I'm happy to help. I will disclaimer myself. I'm still in the Navy. I haven't made that full leap into the industry, but I've still seen a lot just in my time at VetSec. And Joe asks, how do you defeat anxiety during an interview? I'm gonna just approach it with how I do public speaking. I hate speaking in groups. Absolutely despise it. I got asked to speak at one of my friend's retirement ceremonies just a week ago, and like anxiety the whole way leading up to it. The only thing that helps me is practice. Like eventually you do it enough that you're just almost numb to it a little bit. And same thing, like go get informational interviews, ask a few members in the Slack to throw questions at you on Zoom and beat the crap out of you a little bit and kind of get that muscle memory going. What do you think, Greg?
Absolutely. That's sort of where my thing with going to get an interview, like go just do it. Work on building some skills, write your resume as best you can, and then go during the interview. And here's the thing, right? Like find a role that, like I said, you're not too beat up if you don't get it. But this is an opportune time. Like ask the hiring manager, if you're interviewing with a technical person, you're doing a technical interview, why not ask them the questions you want to know? Hey, when you read my resume, what did you think? What is a weakness on my resume? Where's something I can improve? I would totally answer those questions in an interview. I would give that feedback, and I imagine a lot of people would. And you want to make your interview conversational. This is another tip that I try to impart on everybody that I talk to. You do not want your interview to be, hey, can you tell me what TCP UDP is? What's the difference? And then you explain, like, all right, what is the OSI model? Do not get suckered into that, because now you're just a checklist on a list of questions. I've done interviews like this when I worked at government contracting. We just looked for people who met the check marks, and at the end I had to be like, yeah, I think they're pretty good. Let's move them on the next stage. Turn it into a conversation. You want to pivot. If they ask you networking questions, I would immediately follow up with like, what kind of network analysis do you guys do here on the regular? And what was a recent incident where network analysis was really helpful? And they're like, oh, well, we had this like CACbot infection and we saw this like network alert and we did this. And then if you've done any form of network analysis and stuff and you're ready for that, talk about, yeah, I looked at, Iced ID. I've done analysis on the network and this is what I saw. And that's really cool. I really enjoyed it. Now your colleagues talking about work, you will stand out from everybody else who is just doing yes, no questions. You want to get away from that. You want to have a conversation, because now you're reducing your anxiety by just having it be more of a natural conversation. They're going to remember you because you're conversational. And for lack of a better term, everybody, nobody wants to hire an a-hole to work with them, right? So you're sort of getting that out of the way too. You're getting that cultural fit. Like, oh, Greg was a cool candidate. We had a good conversation, really understood like some of the concepts we do with like forensic analysis and our needs here. Like that's a better after action summary of an interview than like, yeah, they successfully answered all the questions to, an acceptable degree, right? Like you are just candidate number 538 in that list, right? You want to make it conversational.
And the last one I got, David, do you feel that sort of pivot is useful when they're asking tech questions?
That is when you do it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because
anytime
why
you
are they asking
to what you know, anytime you can pivot to your passion or what you know, and you can talk about that, I think it's a great way to go. Yeah, absolutely.
Dennis has got it figured out. But yeah, David, if I always look at it like why, like I would think like, why are they asking me this technical question? And then just ask them. Do you guys do this a lot? Like, why do you care? Like, hey, have you ever worked with data loss prevention? Why? Sure, yeah, I understand what it is. How are you guys using data loss prevention, and what risks are you seeing, and how could I help shore up those risks? Like, get into that conversation. You don't have to be an expert on it, but just ask them, like, where do you think I could help out? How could I contribute to that? And hey, that's something I don't know. Where's somewhere I could go look to get some insight?
Yeah.
Like, always use interviews to get new information. You should be walking away with more answers than questions in an interview if you've done it right.
No, awesome advice. Greg, thank you again for the talk today. It's been awesome.
Thank you.
And everybody, if you're interested, go check out Greg's boot camp over at Level Effect. All VetSec members get a discount, I think, still, Greg. Is that correct?
Yep. $2,500 off, I believe it is.
Yep. And then we do one member per cohort. So,
yep. And we also have a scholarship where we do 100% off or partial up to 50% off, depending on our budget and how many people we could get in. But we try to get as many people as we can and help out where we can. But yeah.
All right. Well, again, great talk. Thanks for coming on today, Greg, and hope to see you.
Thanks for having me. Yep. You all have a great day.
All right. Thanks, everybody.